Greetings once again. It's a pleasure to be back. So for this particular session, I'm going to talk about World Suicide Prevention Day. And this is a very important topic to me. It's actually something that I'm really passionate about with regard to mental health. And I believe there's a role we have to play to improve access to mental health care services and promote mental wellness. Beyond treating diseases and treating conditions, we need to ensure that people are thriving in whatever they're doing. And that is why when you look at the definition for mental health, it's a state of well-being in which an individual is able to cope with normal stresses of life, contribute to their society meaningfully, and actually be able to productively work at their job wherever they are. So if you look at the different facets, one, your mental is healthy, and therefore you're able to cope with the normal stresses of life. You're able to meaningfully contribute to your society. And three, you're able to actually run your affairs in a successful way. So when you look at all those dynamics of it, then we need to ask ourselves, are we mentally healthy? If I would ask myself, I would ask you as a person viewing this and actually listening to it, are you mentally healthy? Are you at a good place? And then the other bit of it, the other flip side, actually, what I'm going to look into this particular session is World Suicide Prevention Day, which we marked yesterday, September 10th, 2022. And for this year, the theme actually is creating hope through action. And over time, we all acknowledge that suicide, the burden of suicide has been increasing, and it still is increasing, not like it has been and it has stopped. And especially on this backdrop of the current pandemic that we've been contending with and dealing with every single day, we have to ask ourselves, what do we need to do to overcome the growing burden of suicide and the growing burden of mental illnesses and mental disorders? Because it's a reality of life. We are unwell and we need help. Unfortunately, not many of us are willing and actually engaging to seek that help. And even those who want to seek the help they need are not able to get it in societies and in environments where they hope they will find that help. And therefore, it is our common responsibility to ask ourselves, how do we make this help available to those who need it? And two, how do we actually start acting to make that a reality? What role do we have to play? And that's role that we need to play, what we need to talk about. So in this particular session, one of the key things that is for me is looking at what are the probable drivers that we have, what are the ecosystem enablers and contributors, the policy instruments, what do we need to actually change this narrative? And on that account, I'll be sharing some of the snippets of what I've dealt with in the recent past, and some of the contributions that I've been seeing happening in the industry that I feel we need to embrace and we need to contribute to in a positive and actually proactive way. So when we start on this conversation, the theme for this year is creating hope through action. Biennial, actually, it's a biennial theme that was started last year. This year as well, we're going to still using it. So creating hope through action, and I feel it's a good theme for us to focus on because there's hope that we talk about. We have hopeful things will change and everything, but the question is, are we doing what needs to be done to ensure that actually we realize the aspirations of our hope? Do we manifest that hope? Are we going to make it a reality? Because if we're saying currently globally, we're talking about 700 to 800,000 annual deaths as a result of suicide. So are we happy with that? Definitely, I believe we are not happy with that figure. It's substantially high and we need to put an end to it or reduce it substantially to the bare minimum. And the bare minimum for me would be a zero death as a result of suicide. But the question is, how do we go to that end? So action needs to be taken. And that action is not David taking it alone. It's David taking it and you as the person doing this and every other member of the society taking up the challenge and saying, we need to do something. And that's something that we need to do is what we need to ask ourselves, how do we get to it and what are the key drivers? So when I start this conversation for me, I look at it from why do we have the growing burden of suicide and how can we come around it? And we all know that the probable causative factors, we have mental illnesses that are considered to be causative agents, actually drivers. We could talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. We're talking about depression. We're talking about bipolar disorder and all that. So all these mental health conditions as they arise, they affect our own functioning. And therefore we feel the pressures to the edge and we might decide to take our lives by suicide. And in that case, if we decide to end our lives, then we are already contributing negatively to our conversations. But the problem is, it's not somebody making that decision that they want to because they want to. It's because they want to get rid of the suffering and the pain that they are going through. So what can we do in terms of the mental health conditions? One key thing that is very important for us is to acknowledge that mental illnesses exist and mental illnesses are affecting each of us in different ways. According to statistics indicated that 1 out of 4 people will suffer mental illness within at least once in a lifetime. 1 of 4, that is 25% on average. So it means if we are 4 of us, 1 of us is guaranteed to be having a mental illness or will have a mental illness in the course of their lifetime. So the question you need to ask yourself is, are we open enough to acknowledge that we have mental illnesses? Because unless we identify and actually acknowledge we do have them, then we'll never solve a problem we can't identify. The first way to solve a problem is to identify that we do have them. Then after identifying them, we need to ask ourselves, what care options are available to people who have mental illnesses? Do we have facilities? Do we have qualified professionals in these facilities? And those are the kind of discussions that we need to be having. Like we ensure that we have health facilities. Yes, we do have a number of them, but do they have qualified mental health specialist service providers who are able to actually do the psychosocial counseling, prescribe medication when there's need to, and offer additional aftercare to the patients who need them, so that it's a continuous care. We need to ensure those things are available. And for us to be able to achieve that, is there the investment in terms of financial resourcing? Because medicines are not given for free. And even if they're given for free, somebody invested in them early in the continuum of care. So who is going to do that investment? We need to champion for all stakeholders, from the corporate market to the governments to individuals, to contribute to financing of mental health services and mental health solutions that people need where they need them. That is critical. From a government perspective, we know policies are needed. And policies are the framework that guide what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and how it needs to be done. The only gap actually we've acknowledged in some of the discussion that we had, I remember on Friday we had a discussion under the organization Agriculture, Health and Social Innovation, where I was part of the panelists. In this particular forum, one of the key things that was coming is that we have policies that are being made at high-level governmental stakeholder forums, but at the same time, the people who are informing these policies are not those who are interacting with the communities, are not the people who are formulating, dealing with the individuals who need the help. And therefore, there's a disconnect. Somebody is designing a policy instrument without coming to the ground where the things are happening. And those of us who are working on the grassroots levels where we're offering solutions, designing interventions based on what we are observing and witnessing, we are not actually also willing to engage at the policy formulation table. And I think that is the greatest challenge we have as healthcare workers and the general members of the society. Wherever we are, we need to ask ourselves, we are providing a solution, which is amazing. And that's great. I actually applaud the people who are doing that work. But beyond doing the work, how do you ensure that the work that you're doing is sustainable? That the solution that you presented today can be replicated by others to ensure that it's long-term. If we are not going to do that, then we are doing nothing. Because at the end of the period of time that you're doing the project, you might change your role. Let's say you're working with an organization and move to another organization. If it's not documented, there's not clear frameworks on how that need to be adopted, and it's not streamlined into policies, it's done. There's never going to be growth in it. God forbid you die in the course of the work that you're doing. There's never engagement. It never got into a policy instrument. Who will know whatever you are doing? It will never be featured anywhere. And if it doesn't feature anywhere, you've lost, and actually you've killed the hope for those who saw value in whatever you're doing and serving them in that community. That's critical for us. And beyond talking about the mental illnesses and the services that people need to make available, we need to ask ourselves, what are the other contributing factors? We have socioeconomic and cultural drivers. And that is where we talk about the high cost of living, the different stressful living conditions. You're living in an uninhabitable environment because we have poor socioeconomic factors. These are things that we need to address. And we need to address it by understanding that as an individual is an individual and not a part of the When you're talking about your mental well-being, every other facet of your life, it's your career, it's your livelihood, it's your social life. Anything, whatever comes affect your well-being as an individual will affect your mental wellness and has a contributing to whether you're going to take your life by suicide or not. And therefore, we need to address these holistically. And that is what we need to focus on. So how are we addressing these socioeconomic and cultural drivers? What are the cultures that are actually are punitive and are actually drawbacks to what we need to achieve? If we are able to identify these and find solutions to them, we are going to be in a better level, and we're able to address some of the key things that we have, including genetics and heredity. We know there are certain contributing factors in terms of heredity. We say one out of 10, a 10% of an individual from a family where they've actually been an incident or an attempt of taking life by suicide, then one has a risk So how do we address these risks? And how do we create an enabling ecosystem where that can thrive? And those are some of the things that we need to look at. The ecosystem enablers and contributors. We all are in a society where we know currently social media is the main everything that we do. Before you leave your bed, you've already touched your phone. You went enter to LinkedIn, you went enter to Twitter or Facebook, or even TikTok now. So with all these social media platforms coming up, there's so much good in them, but there's also so much harm that is in them, depending on how we use them. You find cases where somebody is actually provoking others, and actually that could be the last nail to the coffin that takes them down the grave. Are you going to be that person, or are you going to be the person who gives hope where there's need to be hope, and who gives the guidance and support that people need in such kind of forums? Because unless you're kind to others, then chances are you might also never find the kind people that you hope for. So for you to expect the kindness, you also need to give the kindness that you wish for and hope for. And those are the ecosystem enablers we need to ask ourselves. In the communities, in the societies where we're engaging, are we doing our best? And some of the key things that we need to look at is how to be better individuals. Then finally, we need to look at the policy instruments. Even when we talk about suicide, we know that suicide is actually kind of listed among the criminal offenses. And therefore, for the Kenyan context, under the penal code, somebody could be jailed for just making an attempt to take their life by suicide, to end their life by suicide. So is this criminalization good, or is it not good for us? I believe the criminalization of suicide should not be the case. We need to understand that somebody who considers ending their life by suicide, definitely they're going through a rough patch, which is understandable. Everybody has a phase where they have such challenges. But the question is, why don't they have alternative options? Have we made them understand their alternatives? Have we provided the solution and the support system for them to understand that there's a way out of these rather than considering taking their lives? And how are we able to create that ecosystem so that in case they have a problem, they're able to seek help and the help is made available to them? If you're not able to do that, that will be a lost cause. And I'm doing this reflecting on the book that I recently read, The Future of Capitalism by Paul Collier. Everybody, or most of us, would say capitalism has failed us and all that. But the most critical thing that he talks about in that book that I feel we need to look at. One, our society is disintegrating, and most of the challenges we're having is as a result of that disintegration in our society. A sense of belonging, a sense of shared identity. We've lost our shared identity, and therefore nobody cares as much about what the other person is doing, where they're doing it, and how they're doing it. Then without that shared identity, there's no acts of reciprocity, and there's no acts of rescue. When somebody needs help, we need to offer rescue to them, be there to support, because we know that is what we need to do. But if it's only happened when we have a shared identity, and we are committed to driving that movement together as a society, if it doesn't happen, then we're not going to address our problems. Then we talk about it from the aspect on acts of reciprocity. I believe that if I act right, the other person will also act right, and therefore we are creating actually a ripple of kindness. Do we have that ripple of kindness in our society? To some extent, we do some, but some of it we don't. And therefore, we need to urge ourselves and actually challenge ourselves to do better by encouraging and enabling us to have a common society, a common sense of belonging, and a common commitment to doing good in serving others and ensuring we have a working society. If we don't put in the work, it won't happen. And if it doesn't happen, then it is still us that will be fighting and dealing with these challenges that we are dealing with every single day. So we need to share identity, a common commitment as individuals to address the challenges that are facing us every single day in the current situation, and follow through. Beyond commitments, we need to act. And that is where creating hope through action is a credible and actually a fantastic thing for us. Because if we have a shared identity and we understand that it is my responsibility, it is your responsibility to overcome these challenges, then we need to make a commitment. Once we make that commitment together, then it's about acting. Are you going to act or not? We need to act. Then once we act, we're changing our story and rewriting that narrative in the best way we can. And I'm hopeful that we're going to make that move, and we're going to shape our societies to be better, knowing that it is me and you can make the society better, not any other person. And as I end this presentation, one of the key things in terms of this discussion for me is oftentimes we keep complaining and we keep talking about the problems that we have. But the only thing we have to rest assured is that we can never complain our problems away. We can never complain and point our problems away. They will never go. The only way to act, the only way to get rid of our problems is to act. So we can't complain our problems away. We can only work our way out of them. And working our way means me and you committing to overcome them and ensure we have an enabling a socially responsible society that believes that in doing their best, they're creating a better generation and a better future for the entire world to thrive and do the best in whatever they can. I hope this enlightens you a bit and makes us commit to address this challenge that we're having, ensure mental health services are available. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about in this as I end is that as much as we're talking about mental health facilities, policies, and all that, it needs to start in building resilience in our individuals, in our societies. And one of the greatest recommendations that I would ever have is, can we have psychosocial training and courses integrated into our curriculum from primary school 1 to university education, so that we are all informed, we are all enlightened, we understand what it entails to be for someone to have psychosocial distress, psychosocial problems, mental health disorders, mental illnesses, so that they're able to cope and they're able to find better solutions. I remember during my schooling days when I was a kid, we used to have the peer counselors clubs in our primary schools. Of late, I've not heard of them anymore. So how do we ensure that kind of ecosystem exists? And we don't even need to have it as peer counselors, a specific select special group of people. We need to offer the training to all the students and everybody in the society. Then once they all have it, it means in case there's ever going to be a need anywhere, there's always somebody who is around who can offer the help, who can hold the hand of that person and help us overcome the challenges and the hurdles that we're dealing with in the society. And if you're able to do that, we'll be on a trajectory to change our narrative to be a better mentally healthy and socially responsible society. And that is all I hope for and all I wish for. Thank you so much for engaging. Please subscribe to the channel. Let's grow it. Let's keep the discussions going. And let's redefine and actually improve on our society the best way we can. Thank you so much. Engage with you next. Thank you.